Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our daily video posts. Last time I talked a little bit about the analogy of weeding a garden, how that's very similar to our Dharma practice, where, basically we're letting go of what's unwholesome and cultivating what's wholesome. And I referenced the Buddha's quote where he said, cultivate the good. No, it starts with do no evil, cultivate the good, train the heart and mind. This is the teachings of all the Buddhas. But just that very kind of pithy pointing to, yeah, this is what we're doing. Do no evil, pull the weeds, let go of what's unwholesome, cultivate the good, cultivate what we want, broccoli, or in this case, wholesome mind states. And so, absolutely, that's what we're doing. And how we do it is important, and that's what I want to go into a little bit more today. Kind of like a little more the nuance of, what might be the best way to weed the garden, or you could say the best approach. Because what we want to avoid, or I would say what's helpful to avoid, is to start making unwholesome mind states that we notice in our mind wrong. So the greed, hatred, and delusion, and all the variations of that somehow that's wrong or bad, like inherently that it's wrong or bad. And of course, the Buddha never taught that. He just taught, I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and its end, which means basically taught there are these things that lead to happiness and there are these things that lead to suffering. And that's really the only distinction or kind of duality in which he taught with. And so if we start adding more things like good and bad onto what we're noticing, it's just not helpful because, well, it's not true. There's nothing good necessarily about wholesome, or nothing bad about unwholesome. These are, fabrications of the mind when we choose what's good or bad. So it's just not helpful to do that. Unwholesome mind states bad. Well, if that weren't enough, what then happens is very commonly is not only the unwholesome mind states bad, but then very quickly through identification with them, we become bad because they're happening in our mind. And of course, we tend to identify with what arises in our mind as though they are ours. And if that view is present of, the mind is ours and we should be able to control it, then when we can't, then we must be doing something wrong, right? When unwholesome mind states arise, then it must be our fault somehow. So we kind of just, when we make unwholesome mind states wrong or bad, kind of start to go down that whole rabbit hole. And it's just really not helpful. Instead, we want to bring wisdom and compassion to bear on the situation, the wisdom, the clear seeing that just sees, oh, this is unwholesome. When the nuns and the monks, the monastics, in the suttas, they would often say, or be, written as saying, Mara, I see you. And what they were doing is just noting that Mara, the personification of greed, hatred, and delusion, was in their mind, in their heart at that time, and that they noticed it. They were mindful of an unwholesome mind state. Doesn't say, Mara, you're bad, you terrible thing, or I'm so bad, Mara, I see you, and what a bad monastic I am. I'm wearing these robes and I still have unwholesome mind states. Oh, let me just disrobe now because I'm such a bad monastic. No, Mara, I see you. This is unwholesome. And what's important about knowing it's unwholesome, meaning leads to suffering, right? That's the difference. It's all. That's the only distinction. Unwholesome equals leading to suffering, wholesome equals leading to happiness. So knowing it's unwholesome, optimally is we know that from our own experience, not from what's being taught or written or what someone tells us, but that we have the time to look at these unwholesome mind states and see that indeed, in our own experience, that they lead to suffering and are a suffering state in and of themselves. Now, to be able to do this, we have to actually be able to hang out with them and notice. We can't notice something about something if we're not looking at it, right? So we have to notice these unwholesome mind states, and then in the Vipassana practice, what's called investigate them, meaning, which basically means be with them and understand them in our experience. Now, if we think they're wrong or bad, we're not going to want to be with them, right? We'll reflexively, reactively pull away. Oh, bad mind state, and again, bad meditator. Let me get back to the breath so I can be a good meditator. If we have this view that unwholesome mind states are bad, we won't be able to be with them. And it's the being with them where we glean the wisdom, the clear seeing that knows in our own experience they're unwholesome. Once that happens, then the weeding the garden happens very naturally. It doesn't happen out of reactivity. It doesn't happen through thinking that they're wrong. It's just, of course we wouldn't want to water those plants because we see from our own experience that they're harmful to us. So we bring the wisdom in to see clearly, but also the compassion. And even though we see these mind states are unwholesome, we are in complete control. And when the conditions are right, they'll arise in the mind. And we are subject to that. We're vulnerable. I think I talked about this in some posts earlier, that quality of dukkha that is where we're vulnerable to change. We're vulnerable to things arising that are not in our control, including things in our own mind. So instead of making ourselves bad and wrong for unwholesome mind states being present, we bring compassion in it. Like, yeah, here we are living in this realm, vulnerable to this happening, vulnerable to our minds being afflicted, in this way. So when we can bring wisdom and compassion to seeing unwholesome mind states, we can remove ourselves from this dualistic good and bad tendency of looking at unwholesome and wholesome, and avoid identifying with them, right? Because that's a whole, we'll talk about this next time, how we can either increase our identity with what the contents of the mind, or we can start to let go of that or weaken that identity. Weeding the garden, yes, important to do, and in terms of today, as important, how we weed the garden. What approach are we taking? What views are we bringing to bear on the wholesome and the unwholesome that we see in our heart and mind? Let's do a little formal practice now to cultivate something good in the garden, mindfulness, right? And it's this mindfulness that actually is what arises to notice when there's wholesome or unwholesome in the mind. And of course, mindfulness itself being a wholesome mind state. And so we cultivate it, we water it, we fertilize it. And in this case, through our formal practice. Let's go ahead and take the position, whatever's most comfortable and supportive for you to do the practice, the formal practice. And I always like to, unless you're lying down, to really emphasize the upright back. It's what gives the posture its alertness. It's also what gives the posture its kind of dignified stance. This is a very dignified practice. So it's helpful for the posture to embody that. And it's helpful when we begin the formal practice to be clear what our intention is. Not in an overbearing way, like we're going to try super hard. That's too much, but just a clear intention. Oh, going to be present, going to be mindful of the present moment. And in this case, with the shamatha practice, the tranquility practice, mindful of just one thing, the breath body. It's all we're concerned about in this present moment. So relaxing the body, softening, kind of widening, letting the front of the body open. That feels okay and safe enough. And as we bring attention to the body softening and widening, then the attention is naturally drawn into the body, where we can start to experience its sensational quality. The body is a living being, all sorts of energy coursing through it, systems functioning, moving. And so it's emitting sensations all the time. And when we become non-distracted and turn our attention towards the body, not just looking at it from the outside, but dropping into the body, embodied attention, then we can begin to connect with these sensations, with the aliveness of the body. Tingling, vibrating, buzzing, pulsing. Maybe we begin to feel these at the touch points where the body is in contact with something. Letting the body be soft and still is the condition that is most favorable for feeling the body. And being connected to the body in this somatically in this way is the condition that's most favorable for it to relax. Feeling sensations in the body where it's in contact with something. And now widening the attention to fill the whole body and just noticing everywhere that you notice sensation. Doesn't mean you'll notice sensations every single place in the body, but just widening the attention. Feeling the whole body all at once. And starting to connect with the body as a field of changing sensations. Tiny, kind of sparkling points of light or points of sensations that are flickering in and out of existence. And perhaps the discrete edges of the body begin to blur as we apprehend the body in a more fundamental way. What we're feeling doesn't have a name. No, it's not Chas. Not tall or short. It doesn't have a gender or non-gender. It's just sensations without clear boundaries. And we let the attention come to rest with this field of sensations. Perhaps we notice the sensations of breath that are part of this field of sensations. They're not separate from it. And yet they are somewhat distinct in their rhythmic pattern. And we let the attention come to rest in what is called in the Anapanasati Sutta, the breath body. Breathing in, breathing out, sensitive to the entire breath body. Every moment of awareness that connects to this breath body is a moment of mindfulness and a moment of strengthening mindfulness. Maybe there's even a subtle sense of happiness or joy in this ability to rest in the present moment. Maybe even a very slight smile forms on the lips. As gratitude arises for having found this path. And to be able to train our hearts and minds so that they incline in the direction of happiness and freedom. We're so fortunate to have found this practice. As you go through your days, and notice unwholesome mind states, see if how you're relating to them. Is there judgment or just clear seeing? Within our practice, we pay attention, we see to understand, not to judge. Such an important distinction. And because of the prevalence of the the inner critic in so many of us, we need to bring attention to start to undermine this habit of judging ourselves. So a very important place of practice here. And I encourage you to bring attention to it so that we can read the garden. We can let go of this habit of judging that is a very suffering state. Okay, I wish you well with that and a good day. And as always, may you have wisdom and the compassion in your heart and mind to meet whatever life brings today in a way that leads more towards happiness and away from suffering. Okay, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.